Hello, I'm European Space Agency astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti on board of the International Space Station. Let's talk about spacesuits. There are two types of spacesuits: EVA suits that we use on spacewalks, and suits that you use inside a space vehicle, like, for example, this one. We call them IVA suits, for intravehicular activity suits. We do not always wear a spacesuit on space station. On the contrary, right now, as you can see, I'm just wearing a polo shirt. We call this a short-sleeve environment. However, we do use an IVA suit on the way to space station, so during launch, rendezvous, docking, and then at the end of the mission for undocking, re-entry through the atmosphere, and landing. And that's because those are dynamic, dangerous phases of flight, and we only have a small volume available, a Soyuz or a Dragon. And so if there was a fire or some kind of toxic fumes or a loss of air, a depressurization, the suit would protect us. When I first came to space station years ago, I flew on a Soyuz vehicle and I wore this IVA suit, which is called Sokol. So we can use the example of the Sokol suit to highlight some of the functions, the features that you have to think about if you design an IVA suit. An IVA suit has two modes of operation: unpressurized and pressurized. You want it to be comfortable in an unpressurized state because that's the nominal state. If there is no emergency, this is how you're going to spend your entire flight, in an unpressurized suit. It also needs to be easy and quick to put on, so you don't want it to be too tight. However, if there is an emergency and the suit does pressurize, you don't want it to balloon too much because you still need to perform some tasks in that situation. That is why IVA suits are usually built custom-made on the body measurements of each individual crew members. And in addition, some suits like this one have adjustment straps that also can account for changes in body size during a long-duration mission. These hoses provide air and oxygen, respectively, from the vehicle. You need to supply air into the suit to avoid a buildup of CO2 in the helmet and also to provide cooling to the crew member. So air flows in through this hose, and then there are integrated distribution tubes that bring it into the helmet and to the extremities. Why does the Sokol have a second hose for a supply of pure oxygen? That's for the case of an emergency. If you have an emergency and, for example, you lose all the air in the cabin of your vehicle, the suit has to pressurize to keep you alive. However, you cannot pressurize the suit all the way up to 1 atmosphere, to normal atmospheric pressure. That would make the suit balloon too much, it would be way too rigid. So in the case of the Sokol, you only pressurize it to about 0.4 atmospheres. At that lower pressure, however, you wouldn't have enough oxygen to breathe if you were breathing air. And that's why in that case, we supply the suit with pure oxygen. Not every suit has this, but I really like it. In the Sokol, you can manually control yourself the pressurization of your suit with this regulator here. And you can also use it to lower yourself the pressure in your suit, for example, after a nominal unexpected leak check. When you are in your suit, of course, you need to communicate with your crewmates and with the ground on the radio. So your suit needs to have a way of connecting into the audio system of the vehicle. And then you need to have a mic to speak and some kind of earbuds or earmuffs to hear. In this suit, you wear a headset like this one. And it's nice because when you cinch the strap down, then it's really secure in place. It doesn't move around if you move your head in the helmet or under G's. And it has mic booms that you can adjust so that they're really close to your mouth to have good comm throughout. An EVA suit, a suit that you use on a spacewalk, is a lot more complex than an IVA suit. because of course it has to work independently of your space vehicle, of the ISS in our case. It's like its own little self-contained spaceship. Also, you have to be able to do hard, complex work in it for many hours, and its nominal expected way of functioning is in a pressurized state, because you have to work out there in vacuum. Let's take a look at two EVA suits that we have up here on Space Station. This is the Orlan suit. Orlan suits have been around for a long time, but every few years a newer version is produced, and this latest one is called Orlan MKS. And this particular suit, suit number 4, is very dear to me because in it I did my first and so far only spacewalk. And this is the EMU, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit. Before my first spaceflight, I trained extensively in this suit underwater in the pool, but unfortunately I never had an opportunity to do a spacewalk in it. Let's talk about some of the things you have to think about if you design a spacesuit. One important decision you have to make is the working pressure of your spacesuit. If we look at the Orlan and the EMU, their working pressures are quite different, about 0.4 atmospheres for an Orlan suit, and a lower pressure, about 0.3 atmosphere, 4.3 psi for the EMU suit. And both choices have pros and cons. A higher pressure means a bigger safety margin in case of a leak in the suit. And it also means better protection against decompression sickness. So your pre-breathing before your actual EVA is going to be a lot shorter and less complex. A lower pressure, on the other hand, like the EMU has, means that the suit is less rigid and a little bit easier to work in. Whatever working pressure you choose, you will need a source of oxygen, so oxygen tanks, and a regulation system to maintain that working pressure. And because the system is so critical, you have to think about redundancy. Your EVA suit has to accommodate crew members of different body sizes. The Orlan here is a one-size-fits-all type of suit with a set of adjustment straps that you can pull to shorten the legs, the pelvis area, the arms as needed. The EMU, on the other hand, is a modular type suit. You build the suit from components of different size and lengths to match as well as possible the crew member's body. You also need to think about how a crew member will don the suit. For the Orlan here, it's quite simple. The back opens like a door, so you can slide in and close the door behind you. For the EMU, however, it's a little bit more complicated. The helmet and the legs are separate components, and you need the help of a person who basically puts the suit together around you. As you breathe inside the suit, you consume oxygen and produce CO2. If you didn't do anything, eventually you would end up with a bubble of CO2 inside your helmet. So you need a ventilation system that makes sure that all that CO2 is pulled away from the helmet and into the CO2 absorbing components of the suit, and that fresh oxygen without CO2 is blown into your helmet. You have to choose a CO2 absorption or CO2 scrubbing system. And there are different chemicals and chemical reactions you can choose from. And then, of course, you need a fan to provide ventilation. The Orlan here has 2 fans for redundancy that you can switch on and off independently. The EMU has one component that includes the fan and also a pump, which brings me to the next function you need to consider when designing a spacesuit. As you work hard outside on a spacewalk, your body generates a lot of heat, and you have to remove that heat in order for you not to overheat. We already mentioned the pump on the EMU, and the Orlan has 2 redundant pumps that you can operate independently. And those pumps circulate the cooling water to a sublimator that in turn rejects the heat into outer space. But how do you remove heat from your body? Spacewalkers always wear a special undergarment that has many tiny tubes integrated in its webbing, and therefore in very close contact with their body, so that cooling water that is circulated in those tubes removes the heat from the body. As you can see, there are many important functions to think about when designing a spacesuit, and I wonder how the spacesuits of the future will look like.